And that is going to push people to transform a lot faster, I think, than many anticipate at this time.
Rolling over into a quick update real fast, just taking a look at something that I had noticed in a video that was shared in the private CYPRX research. We had Emma L. from JP Morgan. She's the JP Morgan product director of JPM Coin. And she said specifically, if you are going to bring significant liquidity into the public chain space, comma, very likely, comma, especially for traditional institutional players. And what I noticed about this clip is they zoomed in on her face when she said very likely. That wasn't my editing. It was the actual podcast people. And when she like looked over and was like, very likely, especially for traditional financial players. And when I watched this video, this rising, it only had 8 views. And I'd say that out of those 8 views, probably 5 of those views are us here in the CYPRX research channel. And I said to continue this, the masses are about to miss out on the biggest wealth transfer in history. Wall Street is moving on chain. It's not a matter of if anymore. Take a second and listen. This is huge confirmation, in my personal opinion, from an industry-leading expert in the space that massive amounts of liquidity are going to flow into public blockchains, because she specifically says it's very likely.
You are managing liquidity on the public chain, right? And then also able to very quickly offer up that liquidity into an account structure. I actually think that this unlocks something new, right? Which is that if you are going to bring significant liquidity into the public chain space, very likely, especially for traditional institutional players, there's a treasury behind all of that liquidity who needs to manage their balance sheet, right? And keep an efficient ratio where their capital is, which depository institutions it's sitting with. And so that means at the end of the day, there's things like notional pooling or lending to repo markets overnight, right? So in order to actually integrate, large scale liquidity into the space, it's important that those fit those existing structures, which tend to be these integrated account-based end-of-day processes, which likely will change that quickly to fully on-chain. So I think that's also something that we see as
So that to me was just super bullish confirmation. I mean, the fact that she said massive amounts of liquidity, or specifically significant amounts of liquidity, is very likely to come on chain via traditional financial players, coming from a representative at JP Morgan, you just don't see good confirmation like that very often. So I thought that I'd play that video clip. Rolling over to this document here, the future is on chain. Canton Network posted this. Anybody can go and read the full report. I just want to take a couple of highlights out of the report and read them to you guys, because it goes hand in hand with what this representative from JP Morgan just said. And we know JP Morgan's partnered with Canton Network, and it's this whole notion that traditional finance is coming on chain, and there's going to be a certain onset of individuals and industry leading participants that get left behind because they're not paying attention to the right things. And a lot of people are not realizing how fast that this is all happening, even though because we're market participants in the moment, it might seem very slow because we're looking at our portfolios day to day. In the grand scheme of things, this transition is going to catch the vast majority of the general population off guard. Whereas right now, there's only about 6 to 7% of the global population actively participating in crypto and DeFi activities. And we're on the verge and the precipice of institutional adoption coming in, where that leaves 95% of the population most likely to be priced out in the next year to 2 years after institutions flood into this space, which is just insane to think about, right? What a time to be alive. So reading thoroughly through this report and some of the highlights that I'm going to share with you guys today, it just aligns perfectly with what Sandy Cole from Franklin Templeton, also a partner of Canton Network, said in an interview 2 weeks ago from the Tokenized podcast. So shout out to the Tokenized podcast for this, where she goes to talk about this new financial system, the new financial rails, and how this transformation is all about to happen a lot faster than most people think.
Yeah, this is just the very tip of the iceberg. I really believe that you're going to see more and more and more transactions being done completely on chain for underlying assets, not just funds. And I think that the forms of payment that people are going to be using is going to be expanding pretty dramatically. We actually, in our thought leadership, kind of refer to it as we're moving into a high-tech barter society, because not only can I use a tokenized deposit, I can use a stablecoin, but why wouldn't I be able to use tokenized gold? Why wouldn't I be able to use a cryptocurrency, right? If I'm looking to buy an asset, I should be able to buy it with any form of payment that is transparently valued and exchangeable, and be able to do that instantly on chain. And so I think this is really, a strong signal that we are going to see the entire financial market infrastructure shift onto new rails a lot faster than people anticipate, right? The benefits that are gained through this are going to be seen instantly, right? We already at Franklin Templeton can allow clients to subscribe and redeem from our money market funds using stablecoins. We're going to be able to allow them to do that using tokenized deposits. We're going to be able to allow them over time to do that using potentially other forms of payment. And I think that this ability to go seamlessly between these different instruments is going to be, I think, foundational to how the new ecosystem works. And to go back to the conversation we were just having, the banks are going to struggle here because their systems have not been built to operate in real time 24/7 like this. They need to reconcile back using batch processes. And so if I accept a stablecoin as payment, I can give you that stablecoin instantly if you are on chain. But then to get the funds that that stablecoin represents back into your bank account, even if the transaction happens on chain right away, the actual funds may not hit your bank account for some time. And I think that this is going to start to be seen increasingly as an unacceptable drag on your own potential money and the way that what you can earn on it. And that is going to push people to transform a lot faster, I think, than many anticipate at this time.
Right. So just huge verbal confirmation from Sandy Call. She said a lot in that video clip to unpack. Rolling over into the document from DFNS. DFNS is a super validator on the Canton network and also a Canton Foundation member. And they just recently put out this piece. So taking a look at it and just reading thoroughly through some of my highlights, I'm literally just going to skim down and go over some of the highlights that I've put on the document, reading through it today. The future is on chain. How blockchain infrastructure can transform the future of financial services, January 2026. As we continue to scroll down, the first one that I highlighted, it goes on to say, DLT has moved far beyond isolated pilots. Large-scale deployments exist in cross-border payments, fund settlement, collateral management, and money market operations, demonstrating that blockchain-based solutions can operate reliably and address friction at scale. Leading institutions are integrating distributed ledger technologies into core workflows rather than treating it as a peripheral experiment. And this just goes to remind me of a panel discussion that I shared with you guys just yesterday of the gentleman from the DTCC sitting on stage with Yuval Ruse, where he goes on to mention that they are literally integrating digital assets into their core infrastructure. Give my computer just a second to load.
Changing the, and the after hours, I think works for, open.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Michael Winnicke. I run the strategy and market solutions team at DTCC. And among the roles that we play, we are looking at the opportunities to unlock new value for markets and market participants as we integrate new DLT technology into our core infrastructure.
Right. So real quick video clip and nothing extravagant. He specifically mentions that they are, as the DTCC, looking to integrate distributed ledger technologies into their core infrastructure. So that just went hand in hand with this little tiny clip where it mentions that institutions are integrating distributed ledger technology into their core workflows rather than treating it as a peripheral experiment, which is just another wake-up call to anybody that thinks that this is some game, right? Even though it is taking lengthy time, and obviously, of course, prices across the board are not very enthusiastic for anybody that's in this space at this moment in time. Nonetheless, this is happening and it should be paid attention to. Being a hybrid institution combining the best of traditional and on-chain finance gives institutions a good chance to lead the industry in this new era. Blockchain enable intermediaries in financial services to do two things at once. One, deliver existing products on new infrastructure. TradFi offerings such as deposits, payments, Trade finance, money market funds, securities, and other real-world assets can be migrated onto tokenized programmable infrastructure. As Sandy Call mentioned, the entire financial infrastructure moving on-chain. This can simplify operations, shorten settlement times, enhance liquidity, enable fractionalized ownership, which is important for us as retail investors, owning things like fractionalized real estate or fractionalized portions of gold, especially considering that your average ounce of gold right now is way too expensive for the normal person to go out and buy. Well, now you can buy fractional little tiny portions of gold instead of buying a whole gold ounce. You can buy little tiny micro portions. And improve transparency while preserving familiar risk, legal and accounting structures. Number 2, design entirely new on-chain offerings. Various financial services are now available to broader clientele with DeFi composability, liquidity pools, programmable yields, and granular access to previous illiquid exposures. Across the product shelved in the technology stack, there are varying degrees of potential for beneficial disruption. Payment and settlement processes are already being altered through on-chain experimentation. Custody, collateral management, and asset servicing are close behind. Over time, more complex offerings such as structured products, lending, and risk transfer will follow. So I like that. It just goes on to talk about lending, right? And what have we been studying here in the Wealth 28 Club? Lending and borrowing, posting our digital assets as collateral. And it's looking like more and more that's going to become a reality very soon in terms of regulated finance. Exhibit 2 shows how these products, service, and offerings could coalesce into an on-chain bank of the future. New blockchain-based entrants to the industry will also appear. Blockchain-native players may overtake incumbents with a more rapid pace of innovation. They may completely reimagine how traditional finance products are engineered and delivered. Concepts such as smart contracts, initial coin offerings, and yield farming could soon lead to clients to question how their TradFi equivalents, trade finance, ECM, and B2B lending are delivered. And then as we scroll down here, this is what it's talking about in Exhibit 2, and it gives a full infograph on all of this. So it says the on-chain bank of the future. Here's your traditional bank where the products, you have accounts, payments, loans, savings, investment products, so on and so forth. The infrastructure that sits it all on traditional banking and the enablement frameworks. Then you come over here and you look at what on-chain banking looks like. And this literally looks like exactly what we're already doing, guys and gals. We're in a wallet-based system. We all have our wallets, safe and secure wallets, instant on-chain payments, on-chain lending, right? On-chain yield products, tokenized assets, which we covered in detail on yesterday's Zoom call with Yuval Ruse, tokenized treasuries and money market funds, on-chain FX, right? We heard that one gentleman from Yellow Card go on to mention.
But I think that people oversimplify the concept of bringing FX on-chain. And there have been a number of companies, even now, there's a number of companies that are trying to bring FX on chain, which sounds great, right? And, you can raise a bunch of money and, everybody loves the idea of bringing FX on chain. But the actual process of doing that involves working with a ton of institutions in a ton of countries that are not going to do this on public blockchains. And they're not going to do it, with assets that they don't have some semblance of control over, right? And I think, this is where a lot of what, Eric and Canton, really helps with, and a lot of where this comes in is as you think about, institutions in these countries that need to be on-chain for on-chain FX to truly happen, right? The banks, the telcos, the large corporates, et cetera. Look, we had a call with the C-suite of a bank, one of the largest banks, in emerging markets today. These guys are not going to use a chain that they don't have control over the consensus. They don't have control over the ledger. They don't have control over any of it. Why would they, right? They're a massive bank. Why would they give up that control? And so I think, you need a system where all of these banks have interoperability, but also have control, right? And that's, to me, that's really the magic of what, Canton has built and why, why I think that like the solution that these guys are working on is really the only way to bring FX on chain, right? I don't think you can actually just issue stable coins for all these different currencies the way that, Tether and Circle app. I think the US dollar is a very unique currency in global trade. These other currencies are going to be controlled by banks. These stable coins are going to be controlled by banks. They're going to be controlled by, the financial institutions in each of these countries. And they're going to want, a certain level of control to feel comfortable actually putting this stuff on chain and making this stuff available. And so I think, as you think about FX on chain, there is still a long way to go because there are a lot of institutions that you need to bring on chain. And frankly, Canton is, one of the only ways that we've seen of actually being able to convince these guys that it's safe to move on chain.
That right now, Canton network is the only network that they've seen so far that has given these large market participants confidence to bring FX on chain. You guys remember that? His name was Chris Maurice. I played that video clip for you guys the other day. Wallet as a service on the infrastructure layer, blockchains. This was very interesting to see. Blockchains, both layer 1s and layer 2s, settling the infrastructure for this new on-chain bank future. Bridging protocols, digital identity, which we've been covering for some time. And then obviously, of course, different security frameworks and so on and so forth. As we continue to scroll down, there was a lot of juicy information in all of that, but I just wanted to stick to the primary highlights. It says, there's already evidence of this transformative potential of the on-chain finance ecosystem. As with many cases of exponential growth and adoption, on-chain finance will seem slow at first, right? So of course, right now, being a participant in this space, especially during a market pullback like the one we're living through, it can be painful. It can seem slow. It can seem like all the hype, the bullish moonboy hopium that's pumped into the market on an intraday basis never comes into fruition, but understand that it is happening behind the scenes. As we continue, this was very interesting. It says the advent of blockchain-based finance is most likely, there's that key vocabulary word right there that this lady here had said and expressed in her commentary, where she said, institutions are very likely, right, to flood in with significant amounts of liquidity onto public blockchains. The advent of blockchain-based finance is most likely to continue. Here exhibits a gradual convergence of TradFi and blockchain native players in a hybrid future. And what I like about this infograph here is, again, it gives you a very good long-term perspective. Because here it mentions where we're at today, where right now, TradFi and DeFi are just now starting to converge. Over the next 2 to 5 years, it slowly starts to look like this. So 2 years puts us in 2028, where TradFi and DeFi are slightly more merged together than they are today. And then over the long-term horizon, 5 to 10 years, they're almost completely transparent with each other and completely merged one in one. So having that long-term horizon here in this document, I really like that little tiny highlight because it just goes hand in hand with what we believe in here at CYPRX, which is we're here for a lifetime, not a short time or a quick time, right? To get a quick fix. 4 scenarios of the future of finance. I like this because each of these scenarios has blockchain as the solution, right? No matter what scenario you look at, whether it's convergence or coexistence. Scenario number 1, on-chain bank of the future. Banks embrace DLT to reimagine products and stack, but maintaining the interface, blockchain native firms become the new backend for financial institutions. That would be pretty cool. Open internet money, scenario number 2, where banks failing to pursue adoption get disrupted and disintermediated, which I believe there's going to be some banks that attempt to resist this transformation and they fall behind. Blockchain native firms become the new standard in financial institutions. Scenario number 3 is a 2-lane system where banks and blockchain native firms coexist, offering an alternative way to manage institutional and personal business finance, breaking the singleness of money. And then scenario number 4 is a complete marginal change, where banks retain their role in TradFi with marginal adoption of DLT, mainly initial use cases, and blockchain native firms retain their position in DeFi. As we continue, in the long run, large parts of the financial industry will be on-chain, traditional banks and blockchain natives alike. The real question is which institutions manage the transition and which ones disappear along the way. Last but not least, it says here, the on-chain future of finance requires more than incremental upgrades to existing systems. Legacy architectures, as Sandy Call mentioned, were not built for programmable 24/7 real-time value flows across multiple chains and jurisdictions. On-chain finance introduces a dedicated digital asset operating layer that integrates with, rather than replaces, the traditional banking stack, allowing digital assets to be consumed as a native asset class by existing channels, services, and core infrastructure. To make it work, new components are required. Rather than a standalone crypto stack, these components will gradually become embedded into existing systems and over time will run horizontally in the back end of tomorrow's financial infrastructure, enabling multiple use cases across organizations. Yuval Ruse hits it off here with a little tiny ending statement and says this infrastructure will not replace all existing systems overnight. Instead, it will sit alongside them and gradually integrate with them, creating a hybrid architecture in which on-chain and off-chain components interact fluidly. Privacy is the key unlock for institutional adoption. It isn't just a feature, it's the foundation for uniting traditional finance and crypto. So I think that, okay, just reading the conclusion for you guys, it says, blockchain and DLT represent a structural opportunity. I love that vocabulary right there, right? Because they tell you before this happens. Because looking back, right, when we go up and we see where it says 5 to 10 years from now, and we come back to documents like this in 5 to 10 years, and we remember reading vocabulary words like a structural opportunity, okay? Looking back, I guarantee you a lot of us are going to be very happy with some of the investments that we made. Structural opportunity to make the financial system faster, cheaper, more efficient, and more inclusive. Future financial institutions will likely combine elements of what are currently viewed as TradFi and on-chain firms, rather than replacing today's rails. On-chain capabilities will sit alongside, progressively integrate with existing infrastructure, creating hybrid architectures that leverage the best of both worlds. While it won't be a standalone prerequisite, providing scalable institutional-grade infrastructure will be critical to enable widespread adoption and allowing DLT to realize its full potential. The financial institutions, this is another really great highlight right here, okay? The financial institutions that integrate wallets, that integrate blockchain networks, that integrate bridges and protocols will be one step ahead in delivering a superior customer experience at optimized cost. So if they're telling institutions here to integrate wallets, blockchains, bridges, protocols, as retail investors, again, to get one step ahead, just like the institutions are, what should we continue to do? Pay attention to these ongoing transformative technologies and continue to do deep research, right?